look. Pharisees. The verse earlier, Matthew, it was chapter that verse 2 Pharisees.
Mormonism.
They're saying, okay. Who owns who? Well, I kept my time, but the temptation is always there. I practiced. I like to be one of those factors. Okay. And what isn't going to get done in the meantime? So and kind of own us. Now, fill up then the measure of your anger. Jesus is talking about religious leadership through the years. Jeremiah. Slap him. Prison him. Shut him up. Sent by welfare. Jesus says, finally, just a few days before, Jesus had come running into Son of David. Hosanna, save Lord, save us. Thinking the other day about hopes expectations of the Jewish people. Now, through the years, they'd read all the prophecies, Isaiah, the prophet, eternal, amazing, amazing. And the hope of the people, they'd been Egyptians, Philistines, the Greeks controlled them. Now the Romans controlled them. So the hope, longing, freedom, this wistful hope, this Messiah, amazing Messiah, right in their own. Here he is. They'd even acknowledged him. The common people had acknowledged Messiah. And yet, the leadership had heard the same. Get rid of him because he was complicating things, usurping their authority, and calling them righteous. All these things pointing out, actually, if they're conscious, or if their consciences had been so severely seared. So when Jesus says all the unrighteousness from way back when to now is come to fruition, your generation taken out. Messiah, one that they looked for centuries, standing in their midst. Genesis, when God said, strike your heel, that woman will strike your head, crush your head. From creation. And here he is. And the judgment that can no longer be held off because the very expectation, promise, and the height of what God had promised is here in their temple, speaking to them. And their eyes are so blind, they can't see anything but their own greed and desire. We know that he can't be the Messiah because he's working on the Sabbath. He healed a man. Oh, man. Oh, my goodness. It is hard. It's hard to. And then I stop. I take a breath. Finger. Prison mom. Mr. Sunday school teacher, still a sinner. Just ask my wife. I bet you if you pressed hard enough, she could come up with something. As remote as it could be. All right. All right. Now, all right. Jerusalem, Jerusalem. City that kills the prophets and stones those who are. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her. Okay. The destruction of Jesus. Telling it. Rome, attacked Jerusalem, tried to conquer the city, and the Jews pursued. One general charge could put, and finally, Caesar finally accomplishes that. We have a first-hand account of what the destruction actually. Can you imagine 2,000 years ago, not myth, story passed on, written down 3 generations. This is a hand account. And I wanted to read it for you this morning. Okay? Now, because I was amazed. Okay, we're going to set the stage here. Okay, now our only first-hand account of the Roman assault on the temple comes from the Jewish historian Josephus. Josephus was a former leader of the Jewish revolt, who had surrendered to the Romans and had won favor from Vespasian. Gratitude, Josephus took on Vespasian's family name, Flavius, as his account, as the Romans fight their way into the inner sanctum of the temple. Now, this is a real busy account, and keep in mind that actually Rome wanted to preserve the temple because it was such an amazing. They wanted to preserve it. Okay, but the soldiers were so enraged, so out of control by this time. The general couldn't control the setting of this. The rebels shortly after attacked the Romans again, and the rebels are the Jews. And these rebels had been successfully. A clash followed between the guards of the sanctuary and the troops who were putting out a fire inside the inner court. The latter routed the Jews, followed in hot pursuit right up to the temple itself. Then one of the soldiers, without awaiting any orders, and with no dread of so momentous a deed, but urged on by some supernatural force, snatched a blazing piece of wood and, climbing on another soldier's back, hurled the flaming brand through a low golden window, gave access on the north side to the rooms, the sanctuary. As the flames shot up, the Jews let out a shout of dismay that matched the tragedy. They flocked to the rescue with no thought of sparing their lives or husbanding their strength, for the sacred structure that they had constantly guarded with such devotion was vanishing before their very eyes. No exhortation or threat could now restrain the impetuosity of the legions. Passion was in command. Crowded together around the entrances, many were trampled down by their companions. Others, stumbling on the smoldering, smoke-filled ruins of the porticos, died as miserably as the defeated. As they drew closer to the temple, they pretended not even to hear Caesar's orders, but urged the men in front to throw in more firebrands. The rebels were powerless to help. Carnage and flight spread throughout. Most of the slain were peaceful citizens, weak and unarmed, and they were butchered where they were caught. A heap of corpses mounted higher and higher about the altar. A stream of blood flowed down the temple steps. The bodies of those slain at the top slipped to the bottom. When Caesar failed to restrain the fury of his frenzied soldiers, fire could not be checked. He entered the building with his generals and looked at the holy place of the sanctuary, and all its furnishings far exceeded the accounts current in foreign lands and fully justified their splendid repute in our own. As the flames had not yet penetrated the inner sanctum, but were consuming the chambers that surrounded the sanctuary, Titus correctly assumed there was still time to save the structure. He ran out and, by personal appeals, endeavored to persuade his men to put out the fire, instructing Liberalius, a centurion of his bodyguard of lancers, to club any of the men who disobeyed his orders. Their respect for Caesar and their fear of the centurion's staff, who was trying to check them, overpowered by their rage, their detestation of the Jews, and utterly uncontrolled lust for battle. Most of them were spurred on, moreover, by the expectation of loot. Convinced the interior was full of money, dazzled by observing that everything around them was made of gold. They were forestalled by one of those who had entered into the building, and who, when Caesar dashed out to restrain the troops, pushed a firebrand in darkness into the hinges of the gate. Then, when the flames suddenly shot up from the interior, Caesar and his generals withdrew. No one was left to prevent those outside kindling the blaze. Thus, in defiance of Caesar's wishes, The temple was caught on fire. While the temple was ablaze, the attackers plundered it. Countless people who were caught by them were slaughtered. There was no pity for age, and no regard was accorded rank, children, old men. Laymen and priests alike were butchered. Every class was pursued and crushed in the grip of war, whether they cried out for mercy or offered resistance. The roar of the flames streaming far and wide, the groans of the falling victims were heard. Such was the height of the hill, the magnitude of the blazing pile, that the entire city seemed to blaze. The noise, nothing more deafening and frightening, could be imagined. There were the war cries of the Roman legions as they swept onwards, yells of the rebels encircled by fire and sword. The panic of the people who, cut off above, fled into the arms of the enemy. Shrieks as they met their fate. Cries on the hill blended with those of the multitude in the city below. Now many people who were exhausted and tongue-tied as a result of hunger, when they beheld the temple on fire, found strength once more to lament and wail. Rhea and the surrounding hills added their echoes to the deafening din. More horrifying than the din were the suffering. The Temple Mount everywhere, enveloped in flames, seemed to be boiling over from its base, yet the blood seemed more abundant than the flames, and the numbers of the slain greater than those of the slayers. Soldiers climbed over heaps of bodies as they chased them. I was struck by the commentary about offered. Okay, all right. I just thought that I didn't know that, Franklin.
Josephus, the witness.
Josephus lived through these times, firsthand witness, kept an accurate record. He even comments a lot of people can't accept it. Writes as though even Josephus, believer, writes about Jesus, refers that there's something special. Okay, all right. Jesus came out of the temple and was going away. His disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple that he. Truly, I tell you, not one stone will be left here upon another. It's interesting that the disciples are pointing to Jesus about the aspects of the temple. And Jesus would be able to quote to them everything. Yeah. Within a few decades. Now, getting back to, therefore, verse 34. Therefore I send you prophets, sages, and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some flog in your synagogues and persecute. You notice anything unusual? Jesus. Therefore, I send sages. He wasn't quoting one of the other gospels. Clearly, the Pharisees would consider that and have no. Right now, some you will flog in your synagogues, some you will kill and crucify. Each of the, but John, Peter and Paul both martyred in Rome, 66 AD, during the persecution under Emperor Nero. Paul was beheaded. Peter was crucified upside down, and worthy to die in the same manner. Now, and some of these disciples variability. Andrew went to the land of the man-eater, what is now the Soviet Union. Christians there claim him as the bring the gospel. He also preached in Asia Minor, Turkey, and in Greece. He is said to have been crucified. Thomas was probably most active in the area east of Syria. Tradition has him preaching as far east as ancient Marthoma Christians founder. Claim that he died there when pierced through. Philip possibly had a powerful ministry in Carthage in North Africa, Minor, where he converted the wife of the consul. Retaliation, proconsul had Philip arrested, scourged, imprisoned. Matthew, the tax collector and writer of the gospel, ministered in Persia. Some of the oldest reports say he was not martyred, stabbed to death. Bartholomew had widespread missionary trips attributed to him by tradition. India with Thomas, back to Armenia, and also to Ethiopia and southern Arabia. There are various accounts of how he met his death as a martyr. John, the son of Alphaeus, one of at least three James referred to in the New Testament. There's some confusion as to which this James is reckoned to have been in Syria. The Jewish historian Josephus asserted that he was stoned and then clubbed. I have here a note that James, the half-brother to Jesus, at 94 was beaten. Simon the Zealot, so the story goes, ministered in Persia, killed after refusing to sacrifice. Matthias, the apostle chosen to replace Judas. Tradition sends him to Syria with Andrew, death by burning. Their accounts say that he was stoned. John, the only one of the apostles generally thought he died a natural death, old age. Early Latin tradition has him escaping unhurt after being cast into boiling oil at Rome. Okay. Names of Jesus' apostles become very common names for males in the Western world. How many people do you know named John, Peter, Thomas, Andrew, James, Bart? Mark was dragged to death at Alexandria in front of Serapis, the pagan idol. Luke was hanged. And these apostles, prophets, sages, reading about. It paused for a little while when Turkey ship that was trying to be secular, that has kind of given way to leadership. Every kind of imaginable. Turkey is dwindling. 13 Christians killed every day. These numbers are from the 2001 World War list by persecution. 13 Christian buildings attacked. 12 Christians unjustly arrested or imprisoned, and 5. 1 in 8 Christians worldwide facing. Top 10 countries in the world for persecuting Christians: North Korea, Afghanistan, this is in order: North Korea, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Pakistan, Eritrea, Yemen, Iran, Nigeria. Government sanctioned. North Korea, it is estimated there are 50 to 70,000. The level of persecution in the world today, which is greater now, there's martyrs today. You'd think that the church is dying, but that is not the case. The report says that there are 309 million Christians living in these high persecution countries, up from 260 million. Right, I have some verses to look up here. Mike, would you look up John chapter? Gary, would you look up Matthew chapter 24? Franklin, would you look up Luke 21? Okay, John chapter 16. John 16. as the time comes. Okay, Matthew, who has Matthew 24? Gary, verses 9 through 13. Okay. What make of this aspect of all hated by this? Has this been more true in pre-day? You observe. Oh, we have history. I think during Jesus, during the first century, apostles spreading the position of the gospel. Much of it was from the Jewish. There was no. The only religion that dare not overheard anywhere. Hurt you, kill you. Buddhism loves. Zen Buddhism is a specific Buddhism that is everything, all truth found. You go deeper with yourself to elsewhere. What does the thinking we're truth when seems the United States as far it's dangerous for when Jimmy Carter ran for president, he openly was an aspect of curiosity about people in some fun being made. In certain areas, we still want our Christian heritage. Christian heritage. Prager. Prager this. This was commenting. Thankful for. They should be. That our founders believed in, because it was belief in God that guides the civil rights.
If those days human, this cycle
Any other thoughts? upward and up.
They
Yes, they
go?
are.